Nick Austin, welcome to the farm. You're CEO of the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. You fit under the Foreign Affairs and Trade banner. Can you tell us about your organisation?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Appreciate the chance to do that. Sometimes the comment is we're known better overseas than in Australia, so this is a great chance to raise the profile of ACR. We, as you say, are a small government agency within Foreign Affairs and Trade portfolio. We're funded through the Australian Aid Program with the purpose of encouraging Australian researchers to use their expertise for the benefit of developing countries. So we've worked for about 3 decades in forming partnerships, brokering partnerships in agriculture, fisheries, forestry, mainly in the near neighbourhood in the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region.
You're more about technical cooperation than the expenditure of foreign aid. Can you give us a bit of background on that?
Yeah, we see ourselves that way, and I think our partners see us that way as well. So our role is not to undertake the research, but to form the partnerships, to broker the relationships between researchers in developing countries in Australia. So we seek to understand where the opportunities are, where the impediments to productivity or efficient value chains or markets, and then to support research to help address those impediments. So we work on farm, but through the value chain, both input supply of seeds, fertilisers and the like, but connecting production to market. So our objective is to work with developing country farmers, smallholder farmers, typically less than a hectare of land. You might say, well, where's the relevance to Australia? Reality is Australian farmers are innovative. They have to be to survive because they're not supported, subsidised. So we see in Australia capabilities that are relevant, even though the scale of farming operations are quite different. Farmers in the near neighbourhood in developing countries grapple with the same challenges of pests and disease, variable climates, uncertain markets and shocks, but the impact on smallholders typically tends to be more acute than here in Australia. But there's a lot we can share, and the important thing is it is a sharing, a genuine sharing, a two-way flow of knowledge and information, and whether that's about us being able to work on diseases that are exotic to Australia and understand those before they arrive in Australia and seek to prevent that, whether it's about exchanging germplasm, whether it's in animal genetics or in plant genetics, or whether it's about just connecting into global research. And Australia on the global scale is very small, both in the amount we produce globally relative to the totality, but also in our investment in research. So we need to be connecting to the global research scene, which Australia is a supporter financially, but also a supporter through our scientists and having them engaged in these global fora.
That sounds terrific. Can you describe to us some of the major projects that you've got going on in 2014 internationally?
Yeah, we've got a broad range of engagements. Over time we're moving to more thematic programs, so bringing together expertise not just in agronomy or skills on farm, but through policy expertise, economics, sociology. So I'll pick for example, I work in Papua New Guinea, working close to home, where we've been engaging with producers, say in the cocoa industry, where we've been looking at production systems that can address pests like cocoa pod borer, developing integrated management systems, working with smallholders, but working how smallholders can work together as cooperatives to improve the quality of their product. So we've been working addressing pests and disease, but also looking at what are the specifications that get products into higher value markets. So companies like Bayern's chocolates, where we've taken samples of chocolate that have been produced with a smallholder's cocoa back to the producers, and for the first time they've tried the chocolate and can see the way they ferment or dry the beans impacts on the quality of their product. So our role in making those connections, addressing constraints to production, but also connecting that production to market so the value can be captured back at farm. Drawing on Australian expertise, but looking for benefits back here as well.
In humanitarian terms, I understand you've done a lot of work in Timor-Leste. Can you tell us about what the programs have been and what the outcomes have been?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Our work in East Timor, Timor-Leste, has been really important for us, and we were one of the first engagements post-independence for the country, and clearly Food security was a major issue, remains a major issue. Thankfully, there's no longer such an extreme hungry season that was so well known for the East Timorese. But we continue to work to improve the productivity of staple crops. So we began with a small engagement, which was really identifying promising varieties locally and from the international system. That first 5 years yielded some good results, but not impact on farm. The next phase was to try and get those varieties out to farmers, and it had some good success. But the third phase we're currently in of 5 years is really taking that to scale with a national seed system, developing both formally and informally. And in the formal sector, we're seeing some emerging businesses in support, so that the community seed production is now developing into its own businesses in selling seeds to smallholder producers. So farmers have gone from subsistence into now having opportunities of engaging in formal economies and formal markets. And we're really seeing on the back of that network that has evolved other opportunities, whether it's around nutrition or health, to build on the back of the social capital that's been built on what began as a basic agronomy project, now into developing markets and seed systems across the country. We've had some very good uptake of varieties too, with some impressive results in that time. It takes time, it takes commitment, but it's starting to really show results.
Very good. In terms of your mission then, can you quickly describe to us some of the challenges you're facing at the moment, and also, more importantly perhaps, some of the opportunities?
Yeah, and it's very much two sides of the same coin. And I'd use, for example, the private sector engagements, where they've long been a part of ACR's model of working to get impact by working with the private sector. But with the current policy prescriptions of the Australian government focused on economic diplomacy, there's a real impetus for increasing our engagements with the private sector. So we work with the multinational companies like Mars or Del Monte through to small enterprises or small entrepreneurs. So our opportunity now is to try and build on those partnerships, which have been generally successful, but we can do a lot more. We've only scratched the surface of the potential, and the aid program dollars are getting less important relative to other flows of capital, whether that's for remittances or private sector investment. So how can the aid program, or how can ACR's corporations really influence and work with some of those other investments and activities? So we'll be working in November, a workshop to bring together a range of private sector players around our experiences there, to say what are the real learnings out of this, what doesn't work, how do we stop doing that, what does work, how can we build on that. So for me, that's both the challenge and the opportunity at the moment to really increase the scale out and the impact of the results from ACR's work, because I think, as often said, research isn't of any use unless it's making a difference.
I understand you've reported to about 6 different foreign ministers over the years of various complexions on the political scale. You mentioned that they've all shown a fond commitment to your program. Is there a good reason for that?
I think none more so than current Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, and she's been very actively engaged in ACR's and very interested and well across ACR's program of work, and keen to give visibility, and in fact encouraging the agency to look for ways to give greater visibility to the work. I think there are a range of reasons for that level of interest historically in ACR's programs, and the support across governments of different persuasions has been that in many cases there are good news stories emerging from ACR's work. There's very clear benefits, and we invest quite a bit of effort in understanding and measuring the benefits that come from the work, and there's good documented independent evidence of the returns on investment in ACR's work. But I think it's also the soft diplomacy, it's the people-to-people links, it's the connections that exist long after ACR's work is finished, whether they're between individuals with formal training and people, the exchange between Australians and their counterparts in particularly the near neighbourhood, whether it's the institutional links that form, and again those exist long after ACR has stepped back. So I think there's a range of positive stories there, often better known, I think, perhaps overseas than they are here in Australia. But we depend on the capabilities in Australia and work with the capabilities in the CSIRO, state government agencies, universities, private sector and civil society. Anywhere we can harvest the relevant expertise and encourage that expertise into the programs we do.
Nick, finally, tell us a bit about your life journey that brought you to this lofty position as CEO of ACIAR.
Thanks, Mike. I've always harboured a fondness for the agency. I learned about ACIAR as an undergraduate when I was studying agricultural engineering. My own background is off the land, so I had an interest in agriculture throughout. But I guess while I had designs on working with ACIAR, it was a somewhat circuitous route through different, mainly state government research and policy roles over time to find myself here in Canberra. And I've been with ACIAR 5.5 years as the Chief Executive Officer, and it's been a fascinating and fantastic time. It's a really great agency to work with, doing some good work.
ACIAR, better known overseas than in Australia. Hopefully we can do a small bit to change that. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Nick Austin.